My name is Fay Phillips, and I'm 37 years old. For 15 years, I lived a life my own family thought was pathetic. I drove a truck with over 200,000 miles on it, the paint peeling off the hood like old sunburn. I wore the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation, patched at the elbows, because I refused to spend money on anything that wasn't going back into the land. Every single dollar I earned, every bonus, every tax return, every dime I scraped together from odd jobs before I could afford to farm full-time, went into 80 acres of stubborn Kansas soil that everyone in my family told me was a mistake. My older sister, Renata, made sure everyone knew it too. At every holiday dinner, every birthday, every family gathering, she'd bring up poor Faye like it was her personal mission. She'd tell our parents I was drowning in debt, that I couldn't afford heating some winters, that I was too proud to ask for help. None of it was true, but she said it with such conviction, with such practiced concern in her voice, that nobody questioned her. Why would they? Renata had the nice house, the nice car, the husband with the corporate job. I had dirt under my fingernails and a truck that backfired when it started. My parents believed every word. To them, I was always the dumb one, the daughter who threw away a decent office job to go play farmer in the middle of nowhere. My father used to say it right to my face at Thanksgiving, shaking his head like I was a lost cause. Some people just don't learn, he'd mutter, and everyone would nod along, including Renata, who sat there knowing exactly how much I'd actually built and said nothing. Because here's what none of them knew. That land wasn't just dirt. It sat on top of mineral rights nobody had bothered to survey properly in decades, and it bordered a stretch of highway that a logistics company had been quietly trying to expand into for 2 years. I didn't know any of this when I bought it. I bought it because it was cheap, because the soil tested well, and because something in me needed to build something that was entirely mine, something no one could take credit for or tell me I'd done wrong. I worked that farm alone for most of those 15 years. I woke up before sunrise, fixed my own fences, learned to repair my own equipment because I couldn't afford to hire it out. I sat in my truck some nights just staring at the fields, wondering if my family was right, if I really was throwing my life away, chasing something foolish. But I never stopped. Something in me refused to. Then 2 years ago, everything changed. A survey team came through the county and word got out about what was sitting beneath my property and how badly that logistics company wanted the access it gave them. What started as a curious phone call turned into a bidding situation I never expected. Lawyers, appraisers, men in suits who'd never touched soil in their lives, all suddenly very interested in my worthless farm. I sold it 8 months ago for $39 million. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Renata. Not a single person outside the 3 lawyers who helped me close the deal and my accountant, who nearly dropped his coffee when he saw the wire transfer confirmation. I sat in my truck outside the bank that day and cried, not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, no one could call it luck or say I didn't earn it or twist it into something it wasn't. I kept driving the same truck. I kept wearing the same flannel shirts. I didn't change a single thing about how I lived, because I wasn't ready yet. I was waiting. I didn't know exactly what I was waiting for, but something told me the moment would come, and when it did, I wanted to be standing in my own truth, not theirs. 3 days after that money hit my account, my mother called me crying, asking me to come to a family dinner, no matter what. Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone against my ear, staring out the window at the last few acres I still own near the house, feeling my stomach twist into something between dread and disbelief. I didn't know yet what had happened. I didn't know that Renata's carefully built lies were about to collapse in front of everyone. I didn't know that the family who called me the dumb one for 15 years was about to learn exactly who I really was, and exactly what she had done. I said yes to the dinner. I hung up the phone, sat down at my kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself smile. What happened at that dinner changed everything. And it started the moment I walked through that front door. I drove out to my parents' house that evening with my stomach in knots. The porch light was on, the same yellow bulb that had been flickering for years because nobody ever bothered to change it. I remember thinking how strange it was that some things never changed while everything else in my life had shifted so completely underneath me. When I walked in, the tension hit me before I even took my coat off. My mother's eyes were red, like she'd been crying for hours. My father sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, staring at nothing. And Renata sat across from her husband, Desmond, her arms crossed, refusing to look at me directly. Something had already happened before I arrived, something that had cracked the calm surface of our family wide open. My mother finally broke the silence. She told me that earlier that week, Desmond had come across old financial records while helping Renata organize some paperwork for their accountant. Buried in those records were years of transactions, transfers Renata had made from a joint account she and my parents had set up years ago to help cover what she claimed were my emergency expenses. Money my parents believed had gone to keep me afloat during hard years on the farm. Except I never once asked for a dime, and I certainly never received any. My father's voice shook as he explained it. For over a decade, Renata had been quietly pulling money from that account under the excuse of helping poor Fay, money that never came anywhere near me. She'd used it for renovations on her house, a boat Desmond had always bragged about buying with his bonus, vacations she'd posted about online while telling our parents she was too broke to visit because she was helping cover my bills. She built an entire narrative around my supposed failure to hide her own spending, and it worked because nobody ever thought to ask me directly. I sat there listening, feeling something between vindication and heartbreak. 15 years of being the family disappointment. 15 years of my father shaking his head at me. 15 years of my mother's pitying looks. All built on a lie my own sister constructed brick by brick because it was convenient for her. My mother asked me, voice barely above a whisper, if it was true that I'd been struggling all these years like Renata said. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt calm. I told her no. I told her I'd never asked Renata for anything, never received anything, and that every single dollar I'd ever earned went straight into that farm she and Dad thought was such a foolish mistake. Then I told them the rest. I told them about the survey team, about the mineral rights nobody bothered to check, about the logistics company that needed access to my land so badly they were willing to pay almost anything for it. I told them I'd sold the farm 8 months ago. And then I told them the number. $39 million. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I'd ever experienced. My father's face went pale. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Renata just sat there, her mouth slightly open, the color draining from her cheeks as the weight of what she'd done settled over the room like smoke. My father was the first to speak, and his voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. He apologized. He said he was wrong, that he should have asked me directly instead of believing what he was told, that he'd let his own daughter be painted as a failure for over a decade without ever checking if it was true. My mother cried harder, apologizing between sobs, saying she felt like she'd failed me as a parent for not seeing through it sooner. Renata tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to twist the story one more time, but this time nobody was listening. Desmond looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. My father finally turned to her and asked the only question that mattered. Why? Why would she build her entire image, her entire life, on tearing mine down? She didn't have an answer that made sense. She mumbled something about pressure, about needing to look successful, about it being easier to blame me than admit her own financial mess. But excuses don't rebuild 15 years of stolen dignity, and everyone at that table knew it. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I sat there and let the truth do what it needed to do. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like the daughter who'd been seen, not the one who'd been dismissed. Walking out to my truck that night, the same beat-up truck that had carried me through every hard season, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because of the money sitting in my account, but because the lie that defined me for so long had finally collapsed under its own weight. If this story moved you, if you believe hard work and quiet patience eventually get their moment, hit that subscribe button right now.